Here on this channel, I like to ask the hard-hitting questions. Why was Kennedy killed? What happened to Amelia Earhart? Why do you still live with your parents? One of these is harder to answer than the others, but today I want to tackle a completely different beast. Did George Washington have an American accent? Before we get into this, it's important to say that the American accent has very different accents within itself. In this video, we'll be treating the Midwestern accent, which is the one that I have, as the base American accent. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. Old boy G-Dubs was born in 1732, which is during the time where England was still settling colonies in the Americas. The last colony that was settled was Georgia in 1733. This gives us a timetable where George was alive during the arrival of British citizens, but he was born in Virginia. That's important because Virginia was the first colony established by the British all the way back in 1607. Now, why does that matter? Well, since Virginia had the richest history of being a British colony during the time that George Washington was alive, it most likely was a popular spot for British citizens to either go on vacation to or to actually settle. That lets us know that there was a history of Virginia having lots of British accents, and he was probably influenced during the time by people who were born in Britain. What else do we know? We know that the very first audio recording was made on April 9th, 1860, around 80 or 90 years after George died. A Parisian inventor named, Edouard Leon Scott de Martinville, I think that was right, recorded himself singing a French song. I'll play that clip for you. Since the first audio recording was made in 1860, we can see that everybody's favorite president, you guessed it, James Buchanan, was president at the time. Unlucky for us, there isn't any recordings of him. In fact, it wouldn't be until 8 more presidents later until the very first president was recorded speaking. The 23rd president, who is it? I bet you know it off the top of your head. Just kidding, I don't have any faith in you. Benjamin Harrison was recorded speaking in 1889. I'll play you the full 30-second clip now.
As President of the United States, I was present at the first Pan-American Congress in Washington, D.C. Believe that with God's help, our two countries shall continue to live side by side in peace and prosperity. Benjamin Harrison.
He sounds kind of like one of those old sports announcers, doesn't he?
LeBron James got in for the dunk. It was the fastest thing I've ever seen.
Anyway, that recording is kind of hard to hear. Luckily for us, the president after Buchanan, William McKinley, also has a recording of his voice.
My fellow citizens, recent events have imposed upon the patriotic people of this country a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War. Then it was a struggle to preserve the government of the United States. Now it is a struggle to preserve the financial honor of the government. Our creed embraces an honest dollar, an untarnished national credit, adequate revenues for the uses of the government, protection to labor and industry, preservation of the home market, and reciprocity which will extend our foreign market. Upon this platform we stand and submit its declaration to the sober and considerate judgment of the American people.
You hear that? It sounds kind of European. Actually, toward the end there, he kind of sounds a little Irish or Scottish. I'm not sure, I'm American. They all kind of sound the same. But it turns out his family is actually of Scottish-Irish descent, so that might have skewed his accent a little bit. But if we go to the next president, which is Teddy Roosevelt, we can hear a little bit of British accent when he speaks.
The big bosses of the political field, the beneficiaries of privilege in the field of industry, the men who represent that sinister alliance between crooked politics and crooked business, which has done more than anything else for the corruption of American life, are united as one man against the genuine rule of the people themselves. The privileged classes, the representatives of special privilege, of special interests, can always make terms with a boss or bosses. They can make terms with the bosses who dominate the Republican Party. They can make terms with the bosses who dominate the Democratic Party. But they can't make terms with the people. They can't make terms with the men who honestly and genuinely represent the popular will.
And if we go to the president after Teddy, which is William Howard Taft, we can hear a clear American accent.
I am willing to admit that war has accomplished much in the progress of the world. I'm willing to admit that there are certain crises in the forward march of Christian civilization that perhaps could not have been met in any other way than by the sword. I'm willing to admit that war develops certain heroic traits in men and furnishes a test for the evidence of the highest character. Perhaps, too, it trains and disciplines people. But the other side of the picture justifies the prayer of every man, of every civilized man, that war should be abolished, and that the suffering, cruelty, corruption, and demoralization that follow in its train should be, as far as we can bring it about, lifted as a burden from the human race. It is our duty to take every legitimate and proper step we can to persuade the nations of the world to settle their controversies in some other way. They are looking to us as a country independent of entangling alliances, separated from all possible attacks by two wide oceans, rich, powerful, and in a situation where nobody can accuse us of being afraid of any nation or of taking this step because we are afraid of war if war were a necessity. It is the common people of the world that are interested in this business. They know when we have war, it is they that have to bear the burden. It's their sisters and mothers and daughters that have to wait, trembling, to hear the news from the battlefield to learn whether their dear ones have bitten the dust. It's the great mass of the plain people that Lincoln loved so well that have to stand the brunt of war. They do not have the glory of coming home with the gold lace and the feathers and all that falls to the leaders. They are not elected presidents because they happen to be successful. They know the demoralization that follows in the wake of war. We should lead the way, and all doubts as to our constitutional authority should be resolved in favor of our stepping forward as a nation with the power, the wealth, the fortune, and the opportunity that God has given us to help along the movement of Christian progress toward permanent peace.
So what gives? They were born a year apart. I think it has something to do with where they were born. Teddy was born in New York and Taft was born in Ohio. The Northeast was taking on the quote-unquote melting pot moniker that the US is known for today, meaning that many cultures were being brought together. While we can hear Teddy having a resemblance of an American accent, we still hear some European bits in his voice. It's safe to assume that the American accent that we know today, like the one I have now, came around sometime before the 1850s. But this still doesn't answer our question. What about Washington? Well, we have one more clue. There's actually a recording of Grover Cleveland in 1892. While 1892 is later than the Ben Harrison recording, we do know that Grover Cleveland was born in New Jersey in 1837. New Jersey is in the Northeast. This is like the melting pot. There should be some Irish in his ancestry if he was born in New Jersey.
On every question, without waiting for the aid or consent of any other nation on earth. Upon that issue, we expect to carry every single state in this union. I shall not slander the fair state of Massachusetts, nor the state of New York, by saying that the people of those states will declare our helpless impotency as a nation to attend to our own business. It is the issue of 1776 over again. Our ancestors, when but 3 million, had the courage to declare their political independence of every other nation upon earth. Shall we, their descendants, when we have grown to 70 million, declare that we are less independent than our forefathers? No, my friends, it will never be the judgment of this people.
Now, this recording is the closest one I can find to George Washington while not sounding like your muffled cries at night. So, did George Washington have a British accent? While we'll never know for sure, it's most likely that he had the basics of an American accent with some British sounding bits along with it. Kind of like the recording of Teddy Roosevelt, but stronger in terms of the British inside of it. If we had to compare what George Washington sounds like to today, I think he would sound closer to Brits today than Americans. What do you think? Leave me your 2 cents in the comments and let me know what other burning questions you have. I can't help you with the whole living with your parents thing though. It's kind of a personal problem.